Hey, hey, hey. Ooh, I'm telling mama. Raj. Lines a whole generation can still hear. Behind them, a car crash and months in a coma, $1 million lost to cocaine, a mother who walked away on principle. What's happening? Ran 3 seasons. Here's where they all ended up. The pilot was called Central Avenue, and when it tested badly, the producers fired everyone in it except Ernest Thomas. That is how he survived into What's Happening. Still at the center of it, as Raj Thomas, the bespectacled teenager with a notebook and a plan for everything. He was 27 when the cameras started, and nearly 30 when they stopped, which meant the most convincing high schooler on television was a Broadway actor who had already shared a stage with Glenn Close. That training is why the Raj trap hurt for so long. He had come out of Gary, Indiana, through serious theater and a role on The Jeffersons, so being locked inside one grinning sitcom teenager for 2 decades was not a small loss. It also made him hard to intimidate. In season 2, he and Fred Berry walked off the set demanding the money white actors on comparable shows were making, and a later walkout helped kill the series outright, because the producers chose cancellation over another negotiation. He never married. In 50 years, he has mentioned a daughter exactly once, in a single interview, and never returned to it. At 77, he is still working, voicing the Undertaker Mr. Omar for Everybody Still Hates Chris. He is also, increasingly, the one left to speak for the others. In August 2026, he marked a year since Danielle Spencer's death. There is a version of this story where Shirley Hemphill never leaves the factory floor in Asheville, North Carolina. Instead, she went west, and by 1976, she was behind the counter at Rob's Place as Shirley Wilson, the waitress whose put-downs cut sharper than anything the writers handed the boys. She was 29 when she took the job and 32 when the show ended. She got there by mailing a cassette of her stand-up to Flip Wilson, who told her to keep going, and a set at the Comedy Store did the rest. In a Los Angeles comedy scene with almost no room for black women, she made herself impossible to overlook. That mattered to more people than just her. Rosie O'Donnell tells it best. As an unknown young comic, she was ignored by everyone in the room until Hemphill instructed a club manager to put the kid on stage as her opener. She never married and had no children, and the loyalty she might have spent on a family she poured into the comics coming up behind her instead. Her own series, 1 in a Million, lasted a single season in 1980, so she went back to the clubs where she had started. She was living alone in West Covina when she died in December 1999, aged 52. Her one-line demolitions now circulate on TikTok as reaction clips, quoted daily by people who have no idea whose voice they are borrowing. In 1975, a street dance crew called the Lockers performed on Saturday Night Live, and one of them was a heavy-set young man with an extraordinary command of a style almost nobody outside Los Angeles had seen. That was Fred Berry, a year before he became Freddie Rerun Stubbs, all beret and suspenders and helpless grin. He was 25 when the show began, and 28 when it ended, and the dancing America laughed at was the genuine article, learned alongside Tony Basil and Don Campbell. He was the breakout, and he knew it, which is precisely where the trouble began. He led the salary walkouts, convinced the show belonged to him, and that same certainty got him fired from the sequel series after 1 season when he demanded an enormous raise. Hollywood decided he was more expensive than he was worth. By then, cocaine had eaten the money. He later admitted spending over $1 million and being high during the filming of episodes people still quote. He was married 6 times to 4 different women and had 3 children, and none of it steadied him. For years, he earned his living wearing the Rerun costume at shopping malls. Then he stopped. In the 90s, he was ordained a Baptist minister and preached using his own wreckage as the text. Diabetes and a stroke followed, and he died in October 2003, aged 52. His son still posts his father's dance footage. The locking was never the joke. The crash happened in 1977, while the show was still on the air. Danielle Spencer, who played Dee Thomas, the folded arms little sister, whose threat to tell mama became a national catchphrase, was in the car with her stepfather Tim Pelt, and he died shielding her. She was 11 when filming began, and 14 when it ended, and a good part of that stretch was spent recovering from a coma and severe spinal injuries. Watch the 3rd season closely, and you can see it. The careful movements, the sitting down. That injury decided everything after. She left acting completely, went to Tuskegee University, and qualified as a doctor of veterinary medicine in 1993, then spent more than 25 years in her own California clinic. Her specialty was spinal surgery for dogs. She had learned to walk again herself, so she chose the patients nobody else wanted to operate on. She needed that resilience more than once. In 2004, spinal stenosis put her back at the beginning, learning to walk a second time. Breast cancer and a double mastectomy came in 2014, a brain bleed and emergency surgery in 2018. She married Gary Fields in 1999 and David L. David in 2014, and it was David beside her when the cancer returned. She died on the 11th of August, 2025, aged 60. Her memoir had been published years before, under a title she had already earned twice over. Before she was anyone's television mother, she was the Wicked Witch. Mabel King originated Eveline in the Broadway production of The Wiz and sang No Bad News with a force people still describe decades on. And that was the voice she carried into Mabel Mama Thomas, bellowing for Raj from the kitchen doorway. She was 43 when she joined What's Happening, and 45 when she left, and she left deliberately. King wanted Mama given a husband and a real career, rather than a mop and an empty chair. She believed a hit comedy showing a fatherless black family every week was doing quiet damage, so when the producers refused to change it, she walked out of steady work in an industry that rarely forgave that. She said why, publicly, which in 1978 was close to professional suicide. It cost her. Her screen work afterwards thinned to guest appearances, though she did reprise Eveline in the 1978 film and played Steve Martin's mother in The Jerk. Her marriage to Melvin King ended in divorce, and their only son, Larry, died years before she did, a loss she never truly recovered from. Diabetes took her legs and an arm in her final years, and she died in November 1999, aged 66. 6 years after she walked away, The Cosby Show arrived with exactly the family she had asked them for. He was born Jack Crowder, and in 1971 he changed his name to Thalmus Rasulala as a deliberate act of self-definition, an embrace of African heritage, at a moment when that carried a professional cost. 5 years later, he was turning up in a handful of What's Happening episodes as Bill Thomas, the father who drifted in and out of Raj and Dee's lives and never quite stayed. He was 36 when he took the part, which he played as something heavier than the sitcom around it, letting divorce and absence sit in the room unresolved. The irony is that he was playing an absent father while simultaneously playing the definitive present one. In 1977, he appeared in Roots as Omoro Kinte, father to Kunta Kinte, and millions watched him embody exactly the dignity his sitcom character had abandoned. He knew about fatherhood from experience. He had 7 children across 2 marriages, 3 with his first wife, and 4 with Shirley Mozingo, who was still his wife when he died. Heart disease killed him on the 9th of October 1991, aged 51, and there was a strangeness to it that nobody could have scripted. Years earlier, he had guest starred on Sanford & Son as the Heart Fund Man, warning Fred Sanford about heart attacks. 2 days after Rasulala's Own, Red Fox collapsed on a soundstage and died the same way. 6 episodes. That is the entire What's Happening resume of Debbi Morgan, who played Diane Harris, the classmate the boys fell over themselves for. And she got the job partly because at 19 and 20, she could still pass convincingly for 16. Nobody watching in 1976 would have guessed she was the one from this cast list who would go on to win a Daytime Emmy. She did it on All My Children as Dr. Angie Hubbard, opposite Darnell Williams. Together they became Daytime's first African-American super couple, which sounds like trivia until you consider that no network had thought black romance worth building a long arc around before. The Emmy came in 1989. 8 years later, she was the clairvoyant Aunt Moselle in Eve's Bayou, in a performance critics still reach for. What none of that audience knew was what she had grown up inside. She watched her father beat her mother, and she carried that pattern into her own relationships for years, marrying and divorcing 3 times before the cycle finally broke. She wrote it all down in a memoir, unflinchingly, and turned it into advocacy work for other women who recognized themselves in it. Her 4th marriage, to Jeffrey Winston in 2009, is the one that held. She is 69, still working steadily, and in 2026, she and Winston marked 17 years together. The cycle stopped with her. Every teenage hangout on television needs a grown-up standing behind the counter, tolerating everything. And at Rob's place, that was Rob, played by Earl Billings, with a permanent look of weary patience. He was 31 when he started, and 33 when the character was quietly phased out. A budget decision that pushed the adult recurring cast aside to concentrate on the teenagers. That could easily have been the end of a career. Instead, it was barely the beginning of one. Billings, a Cleveland man, became the kind of actor whose face the entire country knows and whose name almost nobody does, stacking up more than 140 credits across 40 years. He was the uncle in Antoine Fisher, one of the most quietly affecting things in the film. He also became, without anyone quite noticing, a fixture in American living rooms again in the 2000s as the man ignoring the Aflac duck. Security guards, cops, exasperated bosses, that was his lane, and rather than resent the typecasting, he made a life out of it. Romantic leads pay better. Character actors work longer. He married Denise Henderson Holt in 2001 and has stayed in California with her ever since, largely retired since around 2018. He is 81. Last July, an obituary for a man with a similar name circulated online, and briefly convinced a lot of people they had lost him. They had not. Hey. He made it up in rehearsal, nothing more than an ad-lib, and the producers seized on it so completely that Haywood Nelson has been repeating it for 50 years. As Dwayne Nelson, the gentle, easily flustered third of the trio, he was the one girls across America decided was safe to love, and he was also the only person in that trio actually living the life he was performing. He was 16 when filming started, and 19 when it ended, while Ernest Thomas and Fred Berry were both pushing 30. Being a minor meant school on set instead of nights out, which separated him from the adult chaos happening around him. He did not drink or use anything, and he credits a strict upbringing in New York for a distance that probably saved him. What he did next has almost no parallel among his co-stars. He walked into technology, becoming a digital media executive and consultant, calling himself a funky urban digiologist with obvious delight. Producing, data, strategy. It was how he stopped being Dwayne without needing anyone's permission. His marriages tell a longer story of trying. 3 ended in divorce across 4 decades before he married Paula de Jesus in 2023, and at 66, he lives modestly with her near the Chesapeake Bay in Virginia. Of the 3 boys who made that theme song famous, he is the last one still here. Rob's place is gone, but that soda shop raised a generation. Which of these lives did you never know? Subscribe for more.